I paid $6,000 to find out my family had a price tag, and I'm not talking about the dinner. That was the thought sitting in my chest like a cold stone, right around the time my youngest daughter looked me dead in the eye and told me I was living too long for my own money. Her exact words. I still hear the shape of them. The room went quiet. Not the good kind of quiet. The kind that happens when a glass breaks in another room and everyone stops to see if someone got hurt. No one asked if I was hurt. 60 years old, 60. And I was still hoping they'd show up as my children, not my creditors. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That morning, I woke up at 5:30. Old habit. 30 years of owning a bakery will tattoo your circadian rhythm on your soul. I don't own it anymore, sold the last location 8 months ago. But my body still thinks I need to proof dough before sunrise. I lay there in the dark, listening to the furnace click on, feeling the empty side of the bed where Tom used to be. 5 years gone, and I still reach for his hand. Some mornings I find the cold sheet and I talk to him anyway. I'm doing it, I whispered to the ceiling. I'm throwing myself a party. Don't laugh. I got up, made coffee in the mug. World's okayest mom. They gave it to me 3 Christmases ago. I used to think it was self-deprecating and funny. Now I read it like a diagnosis. I'd been planning this night for 3 months.
The oak room. White tablecloths thick as winter blankets, chandeliers that look like frozen fireworks. I wore the earrings my mother left me, the navy dress I bought for a charity gala I never attended because Claire had a marriage crisis and I spent that night on her couch instead. I got my hair done.
Sat in that salon chair 2 hours while a girl named Destiny talked about her boyfriend's podcast. I smiled, tipped her 40%. I was ready to be celebrated. Here's what I should have paid attention to. The first thing Jake said when he sat down wasn't, "Happy birthday, Mom." He kissed my cheek without eye contact, looked around the restaurant, nodded at the chandeliers, and asked, "So what does a place like this run you?" Not happy birthday. Not you look beautiful. Not I love you. What does it cost? I told myself it was just Jake being Jake, and oh, I was wrong. They arrived in a cluster, which surprised me. I expected them separately. Jake first, already on his phone, his wife Diane behind him clutching a purse she thinks makes her look like old money. Then Rachel, air kissing both sides of my face and immediately asking if the valet was validated. She smelled like expensive perfume and preoccupation. Then Claire, my baby, 42 years old and still my baby in my head, though the last time she called without needing something was 2019. She brought her new boyfriend Brad, a broad-shouldered man who shook my hand like he was testing produce and said, "So, you're the matriarch?" Matriarch. Like I was a corporation with a crown. I should tell you something about these 3 because it matters for what happened later. They're not the same person. I used to tell myself that. I used to say, oh, they're all a little selfish, they're busy, they don't mean it. But they're different flavors of the same problem. And that night, each flavor came out clearly. Jake is the calculator, cold, practical. The kind of person who'd split a hospital bill down to the cent and feel righteous about it. He doesn't hate you. He just doesn't factor you in unless you're a line item. Rachel is the auditor. She keeps score, she remembers every favor, she'll remind you of every gift she gave you while quietly forgetting every gift you gave her. She's not cruel. She's precise. And Claire. Claire is the one who says the quiet part loud. She always has. Even as a kid, she's the one who cries at commercials and then asks her elderly mother if she's considered that she might be living inconveniently long. The waiter brought champagne. I'd ordered the good stuff. I raised my glass. To 60. To being here. Jake clinked his glass and went straight back to the menu. Rachel took a sip and made a face. "It's a little sweet, Mom." Claire didn't lift hers at all. She was scrolling her phone, laughing at something Brad whispered, her thumb swiping fast, like she was editing me out of her story in real time. I pushed the doubt down. I'd gotten good at that. 30 years of practice. Here's the thing about my kids. I built everything they have. Not metaphorically. Literally. The bakery, Meg's morning 3 locations I started in a rented kitchen the size of a closet, proofing dough at 4 a.m. while they slept. I did it for braces and college funds and the down payment on Jake's house in Denver, the one he's never once said thank you for. Rachel used her college fund for a semester abroad she spent mostly in bars, and I smiled and helped her register for the second try. Claire, I paid twice. College, then the condo she needed after her ex-husband cleaned out their joint account and vanished. I thought legacy was something you could deposit in a bank and withdraw as love. I should have seen the cracks earlier. They were there, small and sharp, like glass in a carpet. Last Christmas, Jake walked through my house running his finger along the crown molding. This place must be worth $800 now, maybe $9 with the market. He wasn't asking about my day. He was appraising my coffin while I was still in it. 2 years ago, Rachel borrowed my mother's sapphire brooch for one night. One night. I've asked for it back 4 times. Every time she changes the subject, smooth as silk. Last spring, Claire called crying. She needed $20,000, kitchen remodel, safe home for my grandchildren. I wrote the check while she stood in my kitchen staring at her phone. 2 weeks later, she posted photos of a new SUV, custom rims. I didn't say anything. I never said anything. Silence was my specialty, baked fresh daily. But the thing that really should have prepared me? 2 winters ago, I had pneumonia. 4 days in the hospital. Jake sent a text. Feel better, Mom. Hydrate. Rachel mailed a gift basket of fruit I'm allergic to. Claire sent a prayer hands emoji. All 3 showed up for Thanksgiving 3 weeks later, though. Empty hands, full lists. I should have known where this was going the moment the appetizers arrived. But I was still telling myself stories. The crab cakes came. Rachel pushed hers to the center of the table after one bite. I'm avoiding shellfish, she said. She'd ordered them. Jake started talking about interest rates, not casually. He was talking about my interest rates. Mom, with the market where it is, have you thought about restructuring the trust? Diane's cousin manages wealth, and he thinks... Rachel cut him off without missing a beat. Diane's cousin sells insurance at Rotary meetings. Mom, if you're serious about protecting the assets, you need someone who actually... If we're talking about the house, Claire said, looking up from her phone like she'd been waiting for her cue. I think it's fair to talk about who's actually going to use it. Jake's in Denver half the year. Rachel's condo is paid off. I'm the one with kids who need a real yard. My yard. My house. My life. Measured like real estate while I sat at the head of the table in my mother's earrings. Brad was nodding. He'd known me 40 minutes, and he was nodding like he had a stake in this. Like he'd already mentally decorated my sunroom. Diane was calculating something on her phone. Rachel's husband was staring at the ceiling, complicit in the way only someone who's learned when to disappear can be. And me? I was shrinking. Right there in my navy dress, I was getting smaller and smaller. The waiter came by with more bread, and I had this wild, embarrassing impulse to ask him to sit down, to pretend for 5 minutes he was a son, just someone who wanted to know how I was doing. I tried to steer it back. Remember when you kids fought over who got the front seat? Now it's who gets my driveway. Jake laughed, flat, like a lid dropping on a pan. Come on, Mom. We're just being practical. You're not getting any younger. That stung, but it was Claire who actually drew blood. She leaned back. The chandelier caught her face. For 1 second, she looked like the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, her hair damp on my neck, her voice small. Don't let the dark get me, Mommy. Then she opened her mouth. Mom, let's be honest. You've been hanging on to that money for too long. Some of us need it while we're still young enough to enjoy it. You're just—" She paused, like she was choosing the exact right word. "You're just living too long for your own money." The detonation was quiet. That was the worst part. Not a scream, a sentence. The table went silent. I looked at Jake. He was studying his water glass, jaw tight. I knew that look. It was the look of someone who heard something terrible and has decided the real crime is that it was said out loud. I looked at Rachel. She was smoothing her napkin over her lap, eyes down, waiting for the moment to pass. No one said, "Claire, stop." No one said, "That's our mother." Jake quietly muttered, "Claire. Jesus." But he didn't say she was wrong. He just didn't want her saying it out loud. That was somehow worse. I sat there with my hands under the table, squeezing them so hard my rings cut into my fingers. The pearls at my ears felt heavy. I'd given this woman everything, paid for 2 college attempts, bought her a condo when her ex gutted her financially, shown up for every birth, every fever, every birthday party where I ended up doing dishes at midnight while she slept on the couch. I'd braided her daughter's hair, taught her son to ride a bike. I'd been the backup, the bank, the babysitter, the buffer between her and every consequence she didn't want to face. And apparently, I'd been doing it too long. I reached for my bag. Here's the thing about the folder. My attorney had overnighted the copies that morning. I'd been putting this off for weeks, telling myself I'd wait until after dessert, after coffee, some gentler moment. I'd almost left the envelope on my kitchen counter. Almost. But gentle was gone. It had walked out the door the moment nobody defended me. I put the manila folder on the table. On the white cloth it looked yellow and official, foreign, like evidence. "Open it," I said. Rachel reached first, always the bold one. She flipped it open. Inside, notarized copies stamped, the particular smell of ink and legal authority that makes your stomach drop. "What is this?" "It's the deed transfer." My voice sounded strange, calm, like someone else was speaking through me, someone who'd been waiting a long time for their turn. "The brokerage accounts, the bakery assets. It's all there." Jake grabbed the folder and his hand moved fast. "Transfer to who?" I looked at each of them. Jake calculating. Rachel's eyes going wet, but not for me, not for me. Claire's pretty mouth hanging open. That mouth I kissed 1,000 times, prayed over in the dark when she was sick with fever, and her whole little body was burning. "The Mercer Street Youth Foundation," I said. "It's done. Signed last Tuesday. Irrevocable." I paused. "The transfer was finalized while none of you had called me in 3 weeks." The reaction didn't come slowly. It came all at once, like a car crash. Claire's voice broke first. "You gave our inheritance to strangers. Not strangers. Children who don't have mothers to steal from." Rachel stood up. Her chair hit the floor behind her, a harsh shriek that turned heads across the restaurant. "This is insane! Mom, you can't do this. We are your family." "You can't do this without talking to us first." Jake's voice had gone cold and professional, the tone he uses when a deal is falling through. "Mom, listen to me. Sit down. You're not thinking clearly. This is a grief response. I need." I stood up slowly. My knees ached. 60 years of tile floors, heavy trays, carrying the weight of people who never once asked if I was tired. "I need you to hear me. You're not my family tonight. You're my beneficiaries. And I'm done." Jake reached for my arm. "Mom, sit down." I looked at his hand on my sleeve, the navy dress I'd bought for a night that was supposed to be about me. "I'm not emotional, Jake. I'm clear. For the first time in a long time, I am completely clear." Claire was crying now, but it was the wrong kind of crying. It was the kind that's really just rage with water in it. "You're ruining my children's future. Do you understand that? My kids, your grandchildren. You're taking from them. I thought about that. I'd thought about it before tonight, actually. There's a college trust, I said quietly. For each of the grandchildren. Education only. It's separate. I picked up my bag. That's from me to them. Directly. You don't touch it. Rachel made a sound I hadn't heard from her since she was 16, and I told her she couldn't go to a party. A raw, furious sound. A college trust? You're leaving us a college trust and giving millions to a charity? I'm leaving you the same thing you gave me when I was in the hospital for 4 days. I looked at her. Thoughts and prayers. I walked away. My heels clicked on the hardwood. I didn't look back. I wanted to. That's the honest truth. I wanted to look back. I was afraid if I did, I'd see something that made me feel sorry for them, and I was done spending my sorrow on people who'd never even asked for it. The oak doors were heavy. The November air hit my face like cold water. I walked 3 blocks to my car. Every step felt like something being returned to me. I drove home. The house was dark except for the kitchen light I'd left on out of 40 years of habit. I turned off my phone before I even got to the front door. I knew what the messages would say. I could have written them myself. You're sick. You're irrational. We're contesting this. You'll regret it. One of them would threaten a lawyer within the hour. 2 would send long messages explaining why I was wrong. One would send something that sounded like an apology but was really just a demand in softer clothing. I walked in, kicked off my heels, and stood in the middle of the living room. The silence was full of me. I went to the bedroom, took off the pearl earrings, set them next to the photo of Tom at the lake, the one where he's laughing, his head thrown back, his hand on my waist. I sat on the edge of the bed and waited for the grief to come, the guilt, the mother's voice that had lived inside me for 40 years, the one that always said, "You could have done more. You should have done more. Why didn't you try harder?" It didn't come. Instead, there was just this settling, like dust after a storm decides it's done moving. Here's the thing I've turned over in my mind ever since. I think I trained them. Not on purpose, but every time they asked, and I gave every time they took, and I smiled, I taught them that love was a transaction. I taught them that asking was enough, that my no was always temporary, that I could be worn down. I handed them that lesson cheerfully for 30 years. I don't say that to excuse them. What Claire said doesn't get excused. But I understand the garden I watered, and I stopped watering it. That's all. The lawyer letters came the following week, contesting the transfer, claiming I lack capacity. I laughed when my attorney read the phrase, "not of sound mind," over the phone. I've never been clearer. It's strange the moment you stop being useful to someone, suddenly you're fragile. My attorney says the transfer is bulletproof. Irrevocable means irrevocable. It's been 6 weeks. I sold the house. Not because I had to. Because I didn't have to keep it as a museum for their expectations. I'm moving to a smaller place and near the water. I've been baking again. Just for me. Sourdough that takes 3 days. No customers. No deadlines. No one standing at the counter with their palm out. Last week, my oldest grandson called. He's 16. His voice was careful, the voice of a kid who's been coached on what to say. "Grandma, Mom says, she says you took our future." I stood in my kitchen, flour on my hands, the same kitchen where I fed everyone who ever needed feeding, and I thought for a long time before I answered him. "Your future is in the trust, sweetheart," I said. "Every penny of it. For school. That's yours, and nobody can touch it." "But Mom said—" "I know what Mom said." I was gentle. "He didn't do this. He's 16 and he loves his mother. Your future is safe. I promise you that. What I stopped paying for was my own invisibility, and that's different." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Are you okay, Grandma? Nobody had asked me that in a while. I had to stop and feel it for a second. Yeah, I said. Yeah, I really am. I'm 60 years old and I'm alone most days. But I'm not lonely. There's a difference. Lonely is a wound. Alone is a room you get to furnish yourself. I stopped being a table for people to gather around. I stopped confusing being needed with being loved. Those two things can look identical from a distance, but one of them hollows you out slowly and the other one fills you up. Tom would have laughed at all of it, I think. He would have said, "Took you long enough." He was always better at this stuff than me. Some nights I stand in my kitchen while the bread is rising and I think about the oak room, the frozen fireworks chandelier, the way nobody looked at me when they should have, and the way I finally stopped waiting for them to. The transfer was finalized last Tuesday. They weren't there because none of them had called me in 3 weeks. That's the whole story. So, Reddit AITA. For giving my estate to a children's foundation after my daughter told me I was living too long for my own money?